Thank you very much. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from, and welcome to Tuesdays with Lloyds. You may have noticed I am not your usual host, Pat Talley. My name is Katie Baines, and I support with communications for our Americas region here at Lloyds. Do not fear, Pat will be back. He had an external meeting clash today and unfortunately couldn't make it, but I shall do my very best to live up to his excellent hosting skills. We're delighted you could all join us today for another instalment of our Syndicate Showcase series. This is where we welcome colleagues from the Syndicate's leadership team to share perspectives on a variety of topics, so ranging from current and future outlook, market conditions, threats and opportunities, and a host of other really interesting stuff. It also provides a great opportunity for you, our audience, to ask the team any questions during the Q&A we'll have a bit later. So today, by very popular demand, we are delighted to welcome Liberty Global Group. And if you're based in the US like me, you'll probably have their theme song stuck in your head all day now. Don't worry, I won't ask our guests to sing it unless they want to. So joining us from Liberty Day on screen, we have Emma Grimshaw. She's our underwriting manager and property binders at Liberty Global Group, and Richard Wheeler, underwriting data manager. Before we begin, some really quick housekeeping. Please do submit any questions during the discussion. We love your questions, but please use the Q&A tool instead of the chat feature. This just makes managing the Q&A a bit easier on our side and ensures we answer as many questions as possible during our time together. Today's session is being streamed live on Lloyd's YouTube channel and it will be recorded. We'll drop a link to the channel in the chat box and we'd encourage you to share this with any colleagues, clients, family members, friends, anyone you name it who's interested, who you think would find this content really, really insightful. We also do have a whole suite of previous sessions available for viewing on demand, so I'd recommend checking that out. And with that, that's it from me. So I'll pass over to our guests to introduce themselves and tell us about their role at Liberty, what they're working on. So perhaps we'll start with you, Emma, and then over to Richard. So perhaps you could set the stage a bit and tell us about yourselves. That would be awesome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Grimshaw. You might know me as Emma Grow. Just changed my name recently as I got married in the summer. I am underwriting manager for property binders at Liberty Specialty Markets out here in London. I've been at the company for just over 9 years now, pretty much always in the delegated authority property book. And I've worked basically from a graduate to an assistant underwriter to underwriter. So it's been a really great experience. The company's developed a lot, and it's exciting times.
Yeah, my name's Richard Wheeler. I'm underwriting data manager. I've been in the market for nearly 20 years. 15 of those have been at Liberty. I cut my teeth actually on international binder business, i.e. non-US. My role's recently changed into one that splits sort of half and half underwriting, with the other half of my role related to MI, data, and more specifically e-trading, which is a real area that we're looking to push forward in. In terms of our portfolio and the portfolio that we work on, as it pertains to the US, it's a US binder book that's endured. We've been part of this book that's been written for over 20 years. We're standing on the shoulders of people that we really look up to, people like Richard McCarthy, where they've written the book for a long time, and we've looked to carry that on and hopefully improve and evolve that portfolio going forward. With it being such a long-standing portfolio, we look to hopefully provide people with consistency, and continuity through what we try to write, which we think is a real cornerstone of writing a binding authority business.
Thanks both. That was a really, really awesome introduction, and congratulations, Emma, on recently getting married. So it sounds like you guys are working on a lot, and I think we all agree there's also been a lot going on in our world at the moment, and the risk landscape feels like an entirely different place to what it was 5 years ago. So in your opinion, how do the major events of the last 5 years, so thinking COVID-19, natural catastrophes, impact what you guys do on a day-to-day basis? And Richard, perhaps we can start with you, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. I think, in terms of talking about COVID, there's a few different elements that have really kind of shaped the world. I think, obviously, a pretty difficult time in terms of how the knock-on effect that we're still really seeing is insurance to value being a real big issue. I think supply chain issues have really exacerbated and really highlighted problems with the valuation of properties across our entire portfolio. One of the real challenges has been really inconsistently applied, and I think historically the diligence has it's been really difficult to make sure that we're consistent in how we treat each of our territories. One thing I will say, I think that the US binder market has performed as well as any in terms of really engaging with tools and software and in general information to make sure that the risks are valued appropriately and that we're getting the right insurance to value. So that's something that I think has been a real positive in terms of the portfolio. One of the problems we've got, of course, is that we get a finite amount of aggregate, as I'm sure other syndicates do. And when things are increasing by 5 to 8 to 10% every year, it means that it can put a bit of a strain on aggregate. So when that's the commodity that we're dealing in and that we deal with in general, it becomes very hard to make sure that we can continually grow at the same pace as inflation. So we're seeing some issues with that, and because the aggregate's not freely available, it means that we've had to make some decisions on some of our portfolios. So that's probably one of the challenges that have really that in terms of the aggregate. There's also sort of the impact on claims. A claim now, in terms of a water damage loss, a roof loss, and things like that, they're costing significantly more than they were historically. And these sorts of things are really affecting our loss ratio, and it's the sort of thing that we need to make sure that we are rating appropriately for and making sure that we're getting the right premium to make sure that we don't undermine our overall profitability. Sort of away from the specifics of underwriting and the account in general, our ways of working have really changed massively since COVID. And I think there's massive positives to that, and there's been some negatives as well. I think historically we were very much people who would have a high attendance at the box, at Lloyd's, I think, which is an amazing trading platform. And it was something that we really enjoyed and engaged with. And I think post-COVID, I think there's been less need for that. And it's something that we don't frequent as often, which I think is a bit of a negative, because like I say, I think it's an amazing trading environment. I think one of the positives we've had is I think it's culturally become more acceptable having conference calls and more regular catch-ups with a lot of our cover holders. I think that's been really, really positive. We can now have more common calls. We can have, when issues come up, it's quite easy for us to arrange something at quite short notice. So, a real positive out of COVID is we've been able to have a lot more interaction with our cover holders directly. So that's, I think that's been really great. It enables us to get closer to the business, closer to our clients. So yeah, sort of both ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Tuesdays from Lloyd sprung from COVID, so another positive. That was a really, really interesting answer. Thank you. Emma, I don't know if you had anything else to build on that, anything you've been seeing in the last 5 years, any changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably don't have to be a property underwriter to know that the global natural catastrophe environment has changed significantly in the past 5-10 years. We've obviously seen an uptick in events in both frequency and their severity, and that's had a direct correlation on the insured loss, the claims count, and kind of, to Wheeler's point, the average claim amount, which is compounded with the inflationary issues that we're seeing. There's changes in climate across all different perils, hurricanes, flooding becoming a massive issue, wildfires, which I think have increased significantly, not just in the US but globally. We are seeing more and more wildfire activity crop up, and then both high and low extreme temperatures, seeing that polar vortex and the cold front come down to Texas, I think 2 years ago, that was kind of unanticipated, unexpected, shouldn't have happened. And we're seeing an increase of those type of events where, we haven't seen anything like that before. So it's kind of recognition of a changing landscape of perils, and shifting that risk landscape in both the risk models that we're using, and then the underwriting strategies. And kind of to Wheeler's point, inflation is causing issues against inflation, but it's also against aggregate, sorry. But also this shift in an increase in the events that we're seeing is also having a compounded impact on the available aggregate and underwriting strategies and capital availability to syndicates. So that is definitely a challenge. We're working through that, and kind of revamping underwriting for the future, taking the things that we've learned and this new normal that we might be seeing, and kind of proceeding with that.
Yeah, totally. It's really shocking to see how weather events are changing in both severity and frequency, to echo your points. It is shocking. So Emma, you mentioned not having to be a global property underwriter to know about the current risk landscape. But as an underwriting manager for property binders, what challenges are you currently seeing in the property delegated market?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've discussed a lot of those in that first point. Inflation, with particular focus on claims inflation, increasing climate related activities. I think one of the specific problems, and I kind of already touched upon it, is how we take that and underwrite for the future, and continue to utilize our experience and the history and the data, but also accommodate for this risk of the unknown, and the events that might be exacerbated by some of these climate touch points, and how we then use that information and mitigate against future losses. I think another big issue that we are seeing in the property market specifically is both legal and regulatory issues, with regards to legal abuse in multiple regions across the globe, and then also the pace that we can make regulatory change, and accommodate for this changing risk landscape that we're seeing as underwriters. I don't know if you want to touch a little bit more on data, Rich.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think with delegated authority, I think data's already always been an issue and a challenge, and it's something that the market in general has tried many times to get its arms around. Data and the accessibility of data continues to be an issue. The consistency of that data, and using it to being able to use that data to our advantage. One thing about binding authority business and writing binding authority business at Lloyd's, we do get exposed to copious amounts of information. All of our cover holders, they're sending monthly bordereau risk level data, claims information. And I think one of the things that I think we've struggled with is being able to harness that in the right way, and a way that helps us and achieve what we want to achieve in terms of our profitability goals. So I think that's a real challenge and continues to be a challenge. Something that we're working on, something we're trying to consolidate our data, try and put it into a format that means that we can better analyze the rates that we're getting, what type of risks have losses, what types of risks are more resilient to loss, and how we play that back into our underwriting to make sure that we're making the right selections going forward. So I think data continues to be, has always been, I think it will continue to be a big issue.
Yeah, definitely. And on that topic of data underwriting for the future, it's also clear to build on that technology in our industry is clearly really growing in importance too. Richard, I don't know if you could build on your previous points, give us a bit of insight into what role you think technology plays today and how you might see this developing over the coming years.
Yeah, in terms of our access to tools and analytics has been, has increased massively over the last few years. The amount of tools, toys, information that we get, it's copious. Like we do really, we're kind of spoiled. I think, to my previous point, I think it's about harnessing that in the right way, and making sure that we build an informed underwriting model from that. We're not really looking to, in terms of technology, like our attitude probably isn't really to sit there and try and replace the underwriter. We want to empower the underwriter with the right information so that they can make the decisions. And I think that's in terms of our strategy. Personally, I think that's something that we want to try and project forward. That at the end of the day, we really trust the underwriters that write on our behalf to make the right choices. But it's it's about getting the right information and putting it in the right places. We've had lots of discussions about wildfire recently with the losses in Lahaina, and there's information that we're able to put together regarding drought and consistent levels of drought in certain areas. How can we build that in? How can we make sure that we don't expose ourselves to those types of losses going forward? How can we adjust? How can we learn? So I think it's a really good time for, there's lots of people and there's lots of interest in it. So it means that we can avail ourselves of that technology. I think it's a really interesting. It's got a really interesting part to play. We've got perennially looking at monitoring and controlling exposures. I think that's something that I think we've been able to do to a certain level. I think it's something that Lloyd's, the way it transacts inherently, in terms of like the bordereau formats and the like, and the kind of phase shift that you get from entering data on a bordereau and then you receive it 30, 60, 90 days later. I think it's the sort of thing that we want to try and unpick to a certain degree, and we think that there needs to be a lot more direct information transfer, and I think that's something that we really want to try and engage with going forward, because we feel that if we want to effectively manage our business and our exposures, we can't wait 90 days to find out what risks we've written and where they might be. We need to, if there's an event that happens tomorrow, we really need to know what the exposures are today. So there, I think that's something else that's definitely going to need a lot of work to get that kind of those kind of systems set up. But I think it's something we want to aim for. I think if we look to build binding authority business from the ground up today, there would be direct information transfer between cover holders and Lloyd's and capacity providers. So I think that's something that we should be aiming for.
Yeah, it allows us to move from that reactionary perspective to a proactive perspective of what is the data telling us, but we can't do that if we don't have it in real time.
Yeah, definitely. It's clear, hearing from you both, technology is playing a really positive role in helping us learn together as an industry, as well as effectively managing our exposure. So thanks, that was really interesting insight. So while this is playing a positive role, what to take it a bit more negative for a second, sorry, bear with me. What do you see as the biggest threat to our industry as a whole at the moment?
I think we've discussed climate change already, and I can only sort of reiterate what Emma said previously. We're being tasked of understanding our exposures and understanding our coverage more than ever before, and the way that we want to try and push ourselves forward is to turn around and sit there and make sure that when there is a loss, that we have an appropriate exposure should an event happen. And because there's events that have happened over the last few years that would have been very hard to predict. Certain phrases like perfect storm gets thrown out. But at the end of the day, that we need to make sure that we're pricing for those. We need to make sure that we've got a better handle on what kind of exposures we are exposed to, and so I think that's a real threat, because when there's certain events that have happened where people potentially haven't got enough capacity to be able to sort of to provide that coverage, I think that could be a real issue for the industry. Something else, got sort of back on the technology slant. I think like AI, I think is continues to be an issue, and I think any kind of sort of improper dependence on it, I think is something that we need to be really mindful of. I think it's very powerful, absolutely very powerful, but I think we're lucky in that we're in a time where people are very cognizant of the impact that it could well have on our industry and our society in general. And I think that cognizance, is hopefully going to help us make sure that we harness it in the right way. So I think that's I think it's something that we need to work with rather than against. But I think there's a caution there to make sure that it's used in the right way. I kind of alluded to it earlier, where even when we're talking about a bit more straightforward, when we're talking about e-trading, we still want that human element in there, and I think that's still something that we really want to be a part of. How we conduct our business going into the future, that even though we have these tools and this information that's going to be able to enrich our ability to make the right decision, I think there's still a human heart there that I think that's really important.
Emma, did you have anything to add on to that one?
Not in regards to threat. I think Rich has covered.
Cool. On the note of human heart, I feel like I've brought the tone down a bit talking about challenges. So isn't it Christmas after all? So on a more positive note, what would you both say, and perhaps we'll start with you, Emma, is the biggest opportunity for our industry moving forward?
Yeah, I feel like it probably mirrors what Rich says, that the threats present opportunities as well when used correctly. AI obviously is a massive, it's not going anywhere, and how we use that and harness that technology that we're seeing is huge. There's some really exciting things. I think Rich mentioned some of the tools that he's seen at the beginning of this talk. We're seeing really exciting technology and tools coming out that will assist this more informed underwriting model of the future. For example, using drones in post-loss analysis, post-event, can massively help that the speed of settling claims, getting money into insured's hands, accurately understanding and analysing damage factors. That's a massive game changer, and we're already seeing that technology be applied, post-event. And there's innumerable amounts of this technology that we're seeing that's going to enhance the way that we work and change the way that we work for the better. And then when you partner that with the people side of things, and ensure that everybody knows how to use the tools, how they can benefit, this people focused approach, with the support of analytics and making informed decisions, I really do think kind of helps us work towards long lasting outcomes. And with the Lloyd's market, solution orientated outcomes, because that's what we're here for, was providing solutions. And yes, there's been some challenges, but that's why we need to pivot and create and find things that work better going forwards. I also think there's a huge amount of opportunity in learning and development. We've got this new generation coming through who've learned in a different way. A lot of individuals these days will have started through COVID. For us who started out writing business at the box, yes, that comes with, you don't have that same exposure, particularly in delegated authority for us, of that day-to-day transactional business. But there's huge amounts of opportunity there in being able to meet people sooner, not having to wait to the US. We're meeting people 3 or 4 times a year to talk through and be proactive with our solutions and strategies. And that's huge, I think. It does definitely present some challenges because that's not the way that we learn. So we have to adapt and try and understand that the way that we teach, it might be different to the way that we were taught. but there's so much in that. And there's these new perspectives coming through. So, for us at Liberty, there's a huge amount of focus on learning and development. Even since when I started, it's a pay it back. You were taught, and now we'll pay it back, and that's how we kind of try and inform our teams and ensure that they not only have the knowledge base that that we have, and we're all continuing to learn, but they challenge that and challenge the way that we've done things, so that they build better, and more informed decisions for the future. And then there's also, I think, as an industry, we can recognise there's huge opportunity here for DE&I strategies. That's been something traditionally, I think, globally has been a challenge, but there's an increased focus on it, and I think it's such a positive and such an opportunity to get more inclusive voices and opinions and understanding into this industry, which is just going to build longevity and these sustainable future outcomes that we're hoping to see.
It's great hearing about this fantastic learning culture and shared understanding, both here at Liberty and in our industry. That's really great to hear. Richard, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
No, not really. I think yeah, I'm I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit old school when it comes to the way that I was trained. I was very privileged. I feel very privileged to be able to learn the way that I did, which was sitting by an underwriter who knew the class of business, and you would be engaged in all the conversations, and it was a great environment to learn in. I think the way that we do business and the way that it's very people oriented, I think with post-COVID, I think it's been tough to impart a lot of that info, like the things that you've learned via Teams. It's harder to get people involved in the conversations that you're having. So I do feel very lucky, but I do think that there's other tools out there that mean that that I think if we engage with in the right way, I think we can do something whereby we can still pass on the information that and what we've learned over the years, and pass that on.
Yeah, that's great. So it's all about, right, bringing different perspectives together and learning from each other, which is great. And on the subject of people-focused solutions and learning together, it feels like a nice note to move to the Q&A. So I'll have a quick look through. I see we have a couple of things in. Thank you very much for your questions. I'll go with this one here. So you've got someone here saying, I've just started in the insurance industry. Welcome. What's your one piece of advice for me starting out? Emma, I don't know if you want to kick off.
Yeah, I think probably kind of touching on what we were just speaking about. I think there's a certain amount of the ability to challenge some of the ways, the traditional ways that we've done business in the past, because we have so much access to new technologies and a new way of thinking. I think there's definitely an argument. There's a lot of knowledge here already, and I think someone in our team told me that there's going to be a huge number of people retiring in the next 10 years from our industry, so that could create this huge knowledge vacuum. So my piece of advice firstly would be to try and absorb as much knowledge from anybody who is potentially retiring in the next 10 years, because there's a wealth of knowledge there, and have been through, these individuals have been through the cycle multiple times. But there's also this ability, like I said, to challenge how things have been done, and thinking about the trends that we're seeing and how the cycle might be changing, the technology we're seeing that might, impact that, and going forward and utilizing that too. Sorry, there's a bit of a mishmash of answers, but there's just so much out there. I never feel like I've finished learning. I try and read as much as I can, and just if I'm around people that have been through a cycle or an event, I just make sure I make the most of their time, if they'll give it to me, and absorb that and try and apply that, and think about how then I can take that forward in my own underwriting.
That's great advice. Richard, I don't know if you had anything else to add?
I don't have a great ton to add, to be quite honest with you. I do think that it is a great industry. I think there's lots of scope for different roles and different fortes. Me, myself, I'm working a lot on data and analytics at the moment. And I think in terms of the type of business that we're writing, it really lends itself towards that and to those sorts of disciplines. So I think having eyes on that aspect of what we do, I think is really important. But I can only double down on what Emma said about like sponging up as much information about the underwriting of risks, risk selection. Like, I can't sort of stress how important that is to be able to pick out the right risks, or through the cycle, whether the market's hard. So picking the right risk through the cycle was really important and a really great skill to have, and should hold you in good stead. I think that's very important. So definitely mirror that about sponging up as much information as you can.
I just wanted to add one other thing is there are a huge number of teams that work within insurance companies, and I think the ultimate decision that an underwriter makes is informed by so many different parts of that cycle and process. I think underwriting a risk, underwriting an account, it takes a village. So making sure that we're incorporating all the knowledge that we have, to access our companies is important, going forward. It's not just the decision of one person, it's an informed decision through all these different tools, people, departments, news, everything.
That actually feels like it leads really nicely into one of the questions that just popped up in the chat. So on that topic of underwriting risks, do you think there's a shift in how the industry accesses risk? Is one we've just had in. You have any thoughts on that?
Accessing risk. I think a lot of our distribution is really established, and a lot of the ways that we access our business has remained relatively constant. I think with the role that I've got in terms of technology and e-trading, we want to change that slightly and make that more efficient. There's always there's an impact in terms of cost on doing business in the way that we do. And it's something that is always a topic of discussion and something that we're always looking to sort of find efficiencies in. So, as I've said a couple of times, we really do think that the underwriter at the desk is a really important part of what we do. And I don't see that changing massively. But the way that we are looking for risks and the way that we distribute our product, I think has been really constant. I can't see that changing massively. I think the method by which we do it, potentially, but the actual direction of travel, I can't see it changing massively at the moment.
I think if anything, we're delegated authority underwriters by trade. There probably will be an increase in the delegation of authority in these programs, because there's a cost efficiency of doing the business in that format, and there's these increased tools to kind of more, help us homogenize risk selection more. So if anything, this method of distribution probably will increase.
Great, thanks both. I will do one more question, and then we'll give everyone an early Christmas present, 10 minutes back in your diary. Clearly your advice went down very well before, because we've actually just had one more question in the chat about what are the top tips for junior underwriters. So do you have any further advice or wisdom to share?
Like, be inquisitive. It's not my forte. I've got to say, like, it's something that I was very much like a lurker. So I sit, I watch, try and understand, and try and soak it up and keep my own counsel on my opinions. But one thing I found, people who are curious, who are inquisitive, I find that particularly engaging. And I think it's a top tip is, like, ask questions, try to understand why the things are done a certain way. If you think there's a better way of doing them, then I think being able to voice that opinion, I think, is important. But I think definitely being inquisitive, I think, is an important tip that I'd carry forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and to add, maybe creating space for your own opportunities as well, seizing opportunities where they come, soaking up that knowledge, going to meetings if you can in person or virtually, if that's, available. If you're not seeing that at the moment, creating the space for that, attending market events and reading, there's so many forums, there's so much information out there. I think sometimes it probably could be a little bit of an information overload, but it's just all there for people to kind of engage with and incorporate in their day-to-day. I would agree with Rich.
That's awesome advice. Thank you both. So I think we're nearing the end of our time today. Emma, Richard, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with, other than the Liberty theme song is going to be stuck in my head all day? Any other closing thoughts for the audience?
No, that theme tune is not my fault, so I'm not taking responsibility for it.
I mean, maybe I had some, but now I can only think of the theme tune.
I'm sorry.
No, it's just thank you very much for the opportunity for us to speak and engage with everyone. Hopefully everyone's found it useful. But no, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. I thought that was an excellent discussion. Thank you so much for your time. And so that brings us to the end of our Syndicate Showcase. I hope everyone found that as interesting as I did. Also, that'll do it for Tuesdays with Lloyd until next year. It's been a pleasure to be your temporary host for today. A quick plug for our content next year. Given its growing importance in our industry, our theme next year will be innovation. We've already got some great speakers lined up. So if there are any topics you'd like to hear about, or even if you'd like to apply for a slot, you can get in touch with Pat Talley to usevents@lloyds.com. Another quick plug, sorry everyone, on the topic of innovation, our Lloyds Lab, so that's our award-winning space and InsurTech Accelerator program, is setting a dedicated theme for the Americas region for our next cohort. That's all around building sustainable resilience in the Americas, so covering loads of the great topics discussed here today. Applications are opening on next Monday, 11th of December. So it's a really exciting opportunity. You can read more and apply on the Lloyds Lab website. And the details for that will go live on the 11th of December. Last thing from me, I promise, when our session ends today, you'll receive a brief set of survey questions in your browser. If you could take a moment to fill these out, that would be really, really helpful. Please feel free to be completely candid in your remarks. We love your feedback and heavily rely on it when building our content. So really appreciate your support. And drop us a note anytime at usevents@lloyds.com. Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Hope you have lovely mornings, afternoons, and depending on where you are, and lovely festive break when it gets here. Thanks all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
Let's see you. Bye.